Konnichiwa minasan, Kitsapuruza ni yokoso.
All right, next up we have Tanaka Yue. She's got a naginata. So she comes in 2 pieces. So the main body with the hair kind of flying out underneath. Long robe. Little tatters everywhere. I like those. There's her hair flying in the wind. Her hakama. And tabby looks like she's wearing for shoes. And then, of course, the arm with the naginata, which is, nagis are basically swords on a stick. And then she's, of course, with samurai having 2 swords. So before I start mucking with it, I want to make sure I know how this fits. And I actually had to fiddle with it a little bit before I started filming here. So it goes, it's kind of obvious how it goes. So if you got this big, flat, smooth area, those are the attachment points. You've got a big, flat, smooth area under there, that's an attachment point. But you have to kind of thread the swords underneath the cloak to get her to fit right, and then you have to kind of lift it up and tuck it all in there. Now there's a lot of gapping now because I'm just kind of half, wetting it, but there we go. So there's how that joint is supposed to look. You can tell it'll be nice. There's not much of a gap. You can do a number of things to fill that gap. You can try to grind it or file it. A lot of times the glue, especially the glue I use, will be enough to fill that gap, so I won't have to worry about it. So we'll see how that goes. So for starters, let's start working on the model itself. So we're going to do the same thing to Tanaka that we always do. So we start with what? Tags. That's right. So we start looking for tags that need to be removed. You know what? Maybe I'll just put that. Can you even see that? Yeah, there you go. Just keep an idea who we're talking about here. So I'm going to take my little stylet. You don't have to have it's just an awl, basically. And so I'm just going to give her a quick going over and make sure there are no little tags flying around anywhere. I don't see any. Nope, that's a tatter. All right, so now we have to look for mold lines. I can tell there are more on her than there were on the wolves, but then again, she's got a lot smoother surface for the most part, so that makes perfect sense. Again, sometimes you can look at the base for clues. So we've got some lines that are kind of going kitty wampus here. But there are lines that come across here, and if you follow those up, they end up on the bottom of the foot, and sure enough, there are lines and problems on the foot. And since the bottom of this foot is exposed, it's something that I want to take care of. Normally, the bottom of the foot, you don't care. I mean, I do because I'm kind of anal retentive, but most people would have no reason to care. So inside of the legs, that's another obvious place for lines, and sure enough, there is a nice mold line. Sorry, right there. I am not concerned too much about extra. I'm taking the tops off of some of these curves, but I don't care. That'll be completely unnoticeable. So if I go just opposite that line to the next leg, there's another little line there. And really, that's all it takes. I mean, this is not a major effort to get rid of these mold lines. I imagine most of you've got your own ways of doing it, but you never know. Somebody new might be watching this, and it makes a difference. I don't know if it's just me. Well, no, I know it's not just me. I spent a very long time online with other games like 40K, and you put your model up on Daka or whatever for people to comment on, and of course it's a good community there. Everybody's really supportive, but even amongst your buddies, leaving a mold line is kind of a mess. All right. Now, I'm going to use another tool. I'm going to go get me a different file. This, you probably can't even see it because of where the light is. There is part of a mold line right along here, and it's buried in there, and it's on a concave surface, and getting to that with a straight file is going to be a mess. Actually, you know what? I'm going to move the camera. I hope you guys give me a second. I do want to get the burnisher tool that I talked about earlier out of the drawer. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to need this much. I should have known better. All right, let's get that back into place. Good. All right, so here's a burnishing tool. Just basically, you can use it to polish. You can use it instead of a polisher for anything that's not as hard as this little bit of stainless steel. So one of the options for dealing with this would be to take the burnisher, get the tip of it in there, and with the burnishers you have to press. You know, with the file you're just kind of barely putting pressure on it because you don't want to remove all the metal. But with the burnisher you're actually trying to push down and smash the whatever you're burnishing into what's below it. And you can see it, you know, if I burnish an area here on the bottom of the cloak, it gets shiny, and that shiny is just like polishing. I mean, I could, if I had a rusty, or not a rusty, but if I had a dull silver ring or something that had been scratched or something, I could take the burnisher and work the scratch out, and it would be nice and shiny and polished when I was done. So you can use the same thing like this. Again, this is a tool. The jewelry store supplier that I recommend if you're in the United States is Rio Grande, like the river. Rio Grande. It's a Texas company. They have all of these hand tools. They are cheap. A buddy of mine who was a professional artist used to tell me to look for the bigger scale the people are that are producing what you're looking for when it comes to handicrafts, the cheaper they're going to be. So if, for example, if you go to a hobby store and buy these tools, you're going to pay absolute maximum price. If you go to a huge jewelry supply chain like Rio Grande, who sells this stuff by the truckload, you're going to pay a cheaper price. If you could find, if there was some industry that needed this stuff by the thousands, then you figure out who supplies them and you get it from them and you pay an even smaller price. So you always want to look for the biggest supplier that you can actually have access to buy stuff like this, because it's just going to be cheaper because they don't have to make their profit on every single piece, where a smaller store needs to make their profit on every piece. And I'm sorry, I know that puts the smaller stores at a disadvantage, but it's just economics. It's the way it is. However, smaller stores have it, and if you need it and you don't have access to some giant retailer, then that's awesome. You can support your local store, and since you're only buying one of them, you're not buying 30 of them. Maybe paying a couple extra bucks per tool is not a big deal. So anyway, so that's how I'm going to solve this problem. There are other files that I own that are actually curved like this. They're called feather files, and they've got file surfaces on the inside and the outside, and you can use them to get at really odd spaces. But I think the burnisher will work fine. So I just kind of get it in there in the cracks and rub it back and forth a little bit. And while this looks all scraped up, it's not. You won't see it when I get to painting everything. Maybe a little bit of a line in there. Again, you don't have to completely erase the line. All you got to do is not make it look like it's not a line. Okay, so here we go. There's a pretty good one right here on the inside of this cloak. Good enough, I think I'm going to file it. And that's a good space for a file. But yeah, just back and forth. You're almost rubbing the file back and forth as opposed to filing. So whenever you have a line here, the first place to look for a line is opposite. That looks pretty good though. There's a little bit of a line I can follow Oh no, I'm okay. I just wasn't sure. All the way down the back of this cloak as it goes through the folds. So some of this, actually, because once again, this part is on the cloak goes down. So right in here, I'm going to use the burnisher. Now it may not be enough. I may have to file it, but if I can use the burnisher, I'd be happier. Oh, and I'll show you guys another trick. I am just throwing all kind of wisdom on you guys today. I hope you're prepared. That. Anybody seen anything like that? That is a ring clamp. So that's another jeweler's tool. And it is for working on rings. That's why it's called ring clamp. So you would put the ring in the clamp, and then you just use the wedge to close the clamp on the ring. Of course, the ring would be in here, so the clamp would be closed all the way. But you can close this super tight. And then the ring surface, then you would leave just outside of it, and it would hold it really tight while you worked on the ring. Well, depending on the model, you can also use a ring clamp to hold model. Sorry. All right, I'm on my wheelchair, and now I've wheeled so far away that I can't get to the... Got to drag myself to the thing here. All right. So what I can do, if I feel I need a better hold on this, now you got to be careful because this is going to put a lot of pressure on the model. These do have leather here, so there is some cushion, but I have to make sure that what I line it up on isn't going to move as the clamp squeezes. And then I just put the wedge in and I push it until it's tight enough. And then something irregular like this, I would always hold the clamp like this anyway, just to make sure. And then I can take my file out, and I know that model isn't wiggling around in my hand, and it makes a huge difference. Oh my gosh, does it make a difference? Let me see. Come on, focus. Probably half the video's been out of focus. And then, so yeah, I'm just sliding in here. Don't need to completely obliterate the line from existence, but I do need to break it up so it doesn't appear to be a solid line. There we go. Nothing to it. All right. I think the cloak, that part of the cloak is one of the hardest parts. There's not much going on in the hat. Maybe a little nubbin pointing out in the odd direction on top. I'm not going to take a lot off because I think that's probably there on purpose, but I'm just barely going to touch it with the file. Inside of the arm, it's kind of a continuation of the general mold line, so I'm just going to go after that a little, get that off. Then if I look at the inside of the arm, then I have to look at the outside of the arm. Roll it a little bit to make sure I'm not missing anything. That looks good. Outside of the pants leg, we did inside of the pants. You should probably do things in pairs, so inside, outside, left, right. That's how you find the lines. You find one mold line and you use it as a key to find the others. Oh, there's a little bit on the inside that I messed up by the crotch. It's good. There's a mold line along the butt. This one might be interesting. So we'll get as much as we can with the file. Sorry, trying to keep this where you guys can see it. I'm probably wandering all over the screen. It's a problem with while I'm doing this, I have no idea what the camera's doing. Okay. I'll grab a feathering file between this model and the next. That would make some of this pretty easy. Alright, so there we go. I did manage to get in, so that's good. Underside of the cloak is A, hidden, so nobody's going to see it, and B, looks good. So I think we got all the major stuff. We certainly got all the most visible stuff. So the cloak has been dealt with, the arm has been dealt with. This other arm looks really good. I don't see a line on it. The legs have been dealt with. So I think we're set. Okay. So now we have this. Now this obviously has gotten bent up a little bit in transport. It's just the naginata. I don't know how important it is. I mean, you'll want to straighten this before you use it. You know, paint the model. But in the assembly stage, I don't know how important it is to straighten it, except that I'm going to straighten it because I have the perfect tool for it. Parallel jaw pliers. I just gently squeeze, and it takes a very bent naginata and in pretty short order makes it a not so bent naginata. You got to be careful, of course, because this is tin. If you squeeze it too hard with the steel pliers, you'll put... there's no teeth on these pliers, but if you squeeze it hard enough, you'll actually compress the lead, not lead, but the tin away from the jaws. I've done that. And then over here, the same thing. I'll start by straightening the blade. And so not only can I straighten it, I can actually turn it a little bit. And then on this thing here. Now, I don't know. I've maybe the staff is supposed to be bent. I used for about 15 years. I did medieval combat with rattan weapons, so that we were actually hitting each other. So it wasn't like a stage thing. We were had real armor, but we had rattan weapons, and it was great fun. We just beat the crap out of each other, and then have beers afterwards. But playing with weapons that are bent with bent halves is just not very... I wouldn't know how to do it well. A straight haft is pretty important. So there we go. So I have more or less straightened out the haft without bending it very much. And again, the more you bend a piece of metal, the weaker it becomes at the bend point. So at some point, if you have something that bends and you have to bend it back, and it bends and you have to bend it back, it's going to break eventually. So you might as well start planning for that becoming obsolete. However, I was able to bend these relatively straight with very little effort and without really any redundant bending back and forth. So I'm really happy with that. Okay, so looking for mold lines on these, and obviously there are no tags or they would have showed up. Excuse me. So with these halves, you got to look along the bottom and the top of the halves. It's just the way they're molded. Typically, that's where you'd find the lines. I don't actually see much in the way of any mold lines on this particular haft. Looks really clean. If you want to, I used to sharpen my blades on my little toy soldiers' weapons. And, these are basically blades. Yes, they're made out of tin, but they have an edge. And with some very light filing, you match the angle of the file to the shape or the edge of the blade. And I'm not going to bother getting a bigger file. But so if you get there's a little bump on here. If you had a flat file, you could bring that out. But it'd have to be a very tightly cut flat file, like that big orange one I had to file off the bottom. It'd make hash out of this. There we go. Now I am fully satisfied. I have sharpened the blade of my ninja. Alright, I'm going to do one last fitting, so I think I know how this goes together. So I'm going to fit the swords underneath the cloak. I'm going to tuck the arm up. Sorry, I can't help the fact that my fingers are going to be in the way of the camera. There we go. There we go. Alright, so there's my fitting. So I know this is how it's going to go. And I practice, so I know I can pull it straight out and push it straight in. Now, if you haven't worked with accelerant before, Not only does it hold things together, so I'm going to move the card so the card doesn't get mucked up in case I dribble glue. What you can do is put glue on one object and put a little accelerant on the other, and when you bring them together, they will seal instantly, which is really handy if you're, let's say, gluing old bakemono arms together and you have these little ball sockets and they don't want to hold together, and you're old and you're shaking no matter what you do. In this case, though, I don't think I want that because I think I'm going to need a little bit of time to get this placed in exactly the right spot. So I'm going to take a little bit of my glue. I'm just going to put it on there. Try not, so I want a little extra because I want it to come through the seams and fill up the seams, but not too much extra because I don't want it splooging all over everything. I'm going to set that in. Get that as close as I can and then hold it still. Let that glue dry, or set at least. Yeah, see, it's still moving around. So I may have to, I want to make sure it's set in there properly. And I don't think it is, so I'm gonna, there we go. So I just found a little pressure point I could use to put pressure on the model without keeping my fingers and thumb on it. So I'll hold it for a few seconds. Take it off. Good. Now this is where, just to be sure, this is my insurance, I will spray the accelerant on it. Just all it takes is the tiniest touch. And that basically causes the glue to freeze on the outside. And there we go. Now we'll see, there is that little gap in the sleeve there. Like I said, there's a bunch of ways to address it. I could take a little bit of a file and just distress that a little bit so that it's not obvious as a crack. Another trick I use is I take super glue and I'll put it on like a little plastic Ziploc bag or something like that. And then I'll take a toothpick and I'll take a little bit of glue from the toothpick and I'll just tap it on that seam so it builds just a little slight mound. And then when that dries, that will effectively hide the seam once you paint it because you won't see it anymore. That works. You guys have seen my Rototool, my Fortum, love my Fortum. And if it's really bad, I've actually gone in with a Fortum and a super tiny grinding bit and just do the slightest bit of grinding. And basically, I'm effectively blending the metal with a grinder. So I just go up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and I clean that up. I think that's a tight enough seam that I don't think it would be noticeable at all. At most, I would take a little super glue on a toothpick and add just a little bit of glue along that seam to fill that up. So anyway, there we go. I don't want to belabor this any more than I have already. Let me get a base. Oh, let me knock the camera over. All right. You know, and if you guys hate this or find it boring or everything's out of focus or whatever, please let me know in the comments. You know, I'm not a senior YouTuber or anything. I don't know what's happening unless you guys tell me. So, all right, again, this is the front of the model. So I'm going to put the back of the model towards the narrower part of the base so that it gives me options for fiddling with the base and making it cool. Oh, you know, one thing I should do is check before I add the glue, just to make sure that everything fits. There you go. So again, I'm going to add some glue, just enough to hold on, not enough to totally obscure the feet in glue. It's also probably not smart to breathe the accelerant. I should be wearing a mask when I spray it. I do have a big fan in my studio here, so usually I don't worry too much about the fumes because I have a big ceiling fan and the fumes go right up it. But it's, unfortunately for me, it's off right now because it makes a loud noise and it's hard to, you can hear it if I'm filming. All right, so there we go. See, a little bit of glue came out the bottom. Take a paper towel, wipe that off, just so it doesn't stick to whatever I rested on for it to dry. Or I could hit that with accelerant and it would just... All right, I'm gonna put her over here. Well, she'll be fine here. So yeah, there we go. She's done. And that is what she looks like. Make sure that's in focus. And there's her card. Nice. All right, these are very easy assemblies, in my opinion.